Today we penetrate the world of American TV daytime talk shows, the final frontier where every taboo is unleashed. Here Americans get to air their dirty laundry in front of 17 million caring people. Everything is unzipped and regurgitated onto your TV screens. This is The Fall of Rome, brought to you from this tiny, humble television studio in Chicago. Here's Jerry Springer!
Politics is my religion. It's not my only, I'm Jewish, but I mean, it's like a religion to me. I am the father of the destruction of Western civilization. I have done that. But frankly...
The admission right here on HuffPost Live from Mr. Jerry Springer.
It's been around for a couple of thousand years. I think we got to give Eastern civilization a shot. You know, we've done it. Well, yeah, I'm proud of my show. Why wouldn't I be? I apologize. I've ruined the culture. I just hope hell isn't that hot, because I burn real easy. I'm very light complected. So it's when you.
I'm very lucky. You know, I happen to make my living in front of a lot of people, and people treat me beautifully, and I get paid handsomely, and you know, I've been lucky enough to have the #1 show in America. I mean, gosh, this is a gift from God. This is a gift from God.
Certainly, with American TV was always upper middle class white. And everyone on television, whether even the sitcoms reflected upper middle class white living. And then our show came along, and it really was the first time we saw another slice of the people that make up a country. Pretty much before we started, American television was all upper class white, upper middle class white people. Let's stop the hypocrisy and just be honest about what the media does, what its role is, and recognize, which is the good news, that we are not deteriorating as a society. Liberals in the end will always win. You can fight your conservative views, but a younger generation, I can even go to the most conservative neighborhoods in Britain. You give me your most conservative neighborhoods and find me the people your age, and I am telling you they are more liberal than their parents. You listen to the same music, go to the same movies. From time to time, you probably even smoke weed. You know what I mean? Who are we kidding? Give all the conservative speeches you want. You know you're more liberal. Your sexual lives are more liberal. Your attitude toward gays is more liberal. Your attitudes on race is more liberal. We're a liberal country. I can go into the most conservative neighborhood in America, the most conservative. And if I can talk to the kids are watching the same movies, listening to the same music, living the same lifestyles. Right. So everything that the liberals ultimately beat the conservatives on in time will become mainstream, and you won't even consider it liberal anymore.
Jerry Springer.
I could view the election of Trump as basically white America's last stand against multiculturalism. There were a lot of people that just see the whole world moving away from them. They see all this globalization. They see their kids dating someone of a different religion or a different race. They see gay marriage is suddenly okay. They see all these things happening. They see the music. They see the television shows. They see everything moving to the left. And how do they stop it? How do they stand up and say, we've had enough? And when you look at where Trump's votes came from, they literally came from communities where there are no Hispanics living, where there are no blacks living, where there are no Muslims living. And so how did these people even feel threatened by multicultural America? It's just, they want to say, time out to this liberalization of the country. So I'm making America kosher one pig at a time.
Jerry Springer was a politician, actor, and television host best known for presenting The Jerry Springer Show, a syndicated tabloid talk show that aired between the years 1991 and 2018. Over the course of its quarter-century, 5,000-episode run, the show would emerge as an era-defining cultural phenomenon, averaging 8 million viewers per episode at its late 90s peak. At first ostensibly intended as a platform for mature political and social discussion, it was quickly retooled after its early seasons failed in the ratings, debuting in 1994 with a new focus on the controversial and provocative topics for which it would become known. Under this wildly popular new format, the show would quickly devolve into a theatre of perversion, stupidity, and absurdity, with Springer playing the role of circus ringmaster as his disadvantaged guests were encouraged to brawl, strip, and otherwise debase themselves for public amusement. When the spectacle proved insufficiently lurid, actors would be hired to artificially enhance it, performing outlandish storylines contrived to be as degrading and salacious as possible. From incest, bestiality, and transgenderism to mother-daughter dominatrix duos to familial fistfights, nothing was off-limits as Springer presided over scenes that would have seemed unthinkable to the viewing audience just a decade prior. For his part, Springer framed this spectacle as being motivated by a journalistic and even democratic desire to shed light on the lives of real Americans, perfunctorily ending his shows with a moralizing sermon centered around the need for tolerance, before signing off with the phrase, "Take care of yourselves and each other." Conservative voices would repeatedly denounce the show's deleterious effects on American society and public morals, but they were powerless to stop the pop culture behemoth, as Springer was aggressively foisted on the American masses by a media establishment seemingly committed to promoting him. But Springer and the cultural establishment that engineered his popular ascent were not motivated by a desire to entertain the American public, nor even primarily by the prospect of financial gain. Instead, they were motivated by a subversive political, social, and cultural agenda, and saw the Jerry Springer Show as a useful means of furthering its aims. The goal of this project was to weaken American society by undermining its moral and cultural foundations. This would be accomplished through elevating and amplifying its lowest elements, thereby inducing the targeted audience into imitating their attitudes and behaviors. It is customary for any given culture to elevate its highest representatives to the forefront of the cultural sphere. This is done in order to establish healthy civilizational role models, ensuring that the society's prevailing attitudes and behaviors are molded to serve its best interests. Correspondingly, healthy cultures will work to suppress negative role models, a form of cultural quarantine that limits the mimetic spread of unproductive or destructive habits. However, when hostile outside elements are able to seize control of a society's cultural apparatus, this process can be inverted for the opposite effect through selective amplification of the culture's most degenerate members. By employing this strategy, Jerry Springer was able to tear at the fabric of American society, fostering vice, sickness, and despair in the American populace. Moreover, moral taboos exist in healthy societies to guide individuals in proper conduct and to help ensure the preservation of the social order. Violation of these prohibitions was in traditional cultures taken so seriously as to be held to provoke the wrath of the gods, a religious metaphor for the dire societal consequences of contravening socially beneficial norms. Springer's televised magnification of America's sins and transgressions constituted a repeat ritual violation of its sacred taboos, a systematic defilement of the moral order. Put simply, the Jerry Springer Show was both a mass humiliation ritual and a mass psychological experiment designed to impair Western culture through inundating it with transgressive, demoralizing images. When exposed to these images, most people will respond in one of a few predictable ways. Some impressionable individuals, children for example, will slowly begin to manifest the behaviors displayed upon the screen, imitating consciously or unconsciously the images presented before them. The destructive social consequences of this phenomenon should be obvious in light of the people and storylines, both real and fictional, typically featured on Springer's show. Others, resistant to this mimetic process, will become demoralized and begin to progressively detach themselves from the surrounding culture, leading to a nihilistic indifference toward its fate and a sense that they have no stake in its future. Concluding that the only winning move is not to play, these individuals willingly surrender the public sphere to their enemies. This state of disillusionment often leads such people into self-imposed exile as social recluses, as they retreat into the escapism of a private world. In other cases, they seek refuge in the codified surrender of ideologies like libertarianism, as they search desperately for a coping mechanism that will allow them to moralize and rationalize their own capitulation. Others still, unable to process the subconscious trauma inflicted by exposure to these images, will lash out irrationally at themselves or the society around them. This often manifests in self-destructive behaviors such as drug and alcohol abuse, self-harm, and suicide. In other cases, it emerges in destructive acts of physical violence, as in the growing epidemic of school and workplace shootings that roughly coincided with the rise of Jerry Springer and the trash TV genre, obvious manifestations of misdirected rage and social resentment. More frequently, however, this trauma presents as an unnatural enthusiasm for harm done against one's own people and society, a schadenfreude driven by the sense that this harm is a deserved punishment. This attitude was epitomized by the American comedian George Carlin, who specifically referenced the Jerry Springer Show in this context, and who frequently reveled in suffering and despair visited upon his fellow Americans, perceiving it as a form of karmic retribution for their bigotry and stupidity. As an extension of the cultural Marxist social deconstruction program, repurposed for mass public consumption, the Jerry Springer Show served to help realize the Frankfurt School's stated mission to make the West so corrupt that it stinks. The social consequences of this campaign include the normalization of unproductive and destructive attitudes and behaviors, the continued breakdown of the family and the institution of marriage, the further degradation of sexual norms and standards, the erosion of social trust, the fracturing of communal cohesion and consequent social atomization, the loss of a sense of meaning and purpose in American life, and the dissolution of personal, social, and national pride. The accumulated weight of this ideological refuse would be sufficient to crush the American spirit, acting as part of a cultural process that reduced a once proud people, formerly known the world over for their good looks, optimism, and wholesome charm, into a nation of sickly, enervated nihilists. But how were Springer and the forces that engineered his popular ascent able to effect this transformation? Once again, the world of literature may provide us with insight. In Hans Christian Andersen's 1844 fairy tale, The Snow Queen, the devil crafts a mirror that distorts the image of everything reflected upon its surface, hiding all goodness and beauty while magnifying all evil and ugliness. The devil tells people that, with this miraculous new invention, one can finally see the world as it really is. Believing this lie, people travel far and wide with the mirror, until everyone and everything has been distorted in its reflection. The world of modern media, of which Springer's show was only a microcosm, is like this devil's mirror, pretending to show us the world and ourselves as they truly are, but distorting our perception to poison us against both. And the longer we gaze into this trick mirror, the more its distortions begin to manifest as reality in the world and in us, so that we become products of the will of its creators. Now only able to see through the lens they have crafted, we act in accord with their designs. Media thus becomes not only a means of controlling attitudes, behaviors, and outcomes, but of defining our very self-image. And as this subliminal weaponry corrodes the self-esteem of the unwitting spectators, they become masochistic, unconsciously mediating their induced self-hatred through the humiliation and destruction of symbols that represent them. And so, as Springer's audience, both in America and across the Western world, watched the depravity unfold, they learnt to cheer and laugh at the debasement of their own society, reveling in the spectacle of its decay and death. What would once have inspired disgust now elicited laughter, and what would once have angered now entertained, as the theatre of American decline became a national pastime. Meanwhile, Springer, through framing himself as a compassionate observer and arbiter in this theatre, rather than the active instigator and facilitator that he in fact was, could effectively distance himself from the depravity over which he presided, transferring the guilt that should have been laid at his feet onto his guests and, by extension, onto Americans themselves. In other words, the consciously crafted subliminal implication of Springer's show is that America and its people are evil. This ritual imputation of sin was the real purpose of the Jerry Springer Show, and it was used to mark all of America as guilty for the vices of Springer's hand-picked guests and paid actors. But what, one may ask, motivated this animus against America and ethnic Europeans? There is no need to spell it out. If you are watching this video, you already know. For although Springer serves as a particularly egregious example of the engineered demolition of Western society, he was not in any sense unique. For decades, the controlled media has carefully curated stories and images, only deeming that which is socially and culturally destructive to be fit for public consumption. This, most fundamentally, is why modern media, from art to popular entertainment, is so relentlessly demoralizing and so completely void of any higher values or aesthetic beauty. Any story or image that could serve to strengthen, ennoble, or dignify is suppressed, lest it rouse the will to life and power in its audience. This stranglehold ensures that the captive Western mind is deprived of transcendence, dispossessed of the stories that imbue life with meaning, and robbed of the positive role models that alone can inspire men to overcome and excel. Relentlessly besieged by devitalizing images, our people are left without recourse, and most cannot even envision a means of escape from their psychic prison. If an outpouring of grief from the media follows the death of an influential public figure, it is usually because the individual in question has contributed in some fashion to the degradation of Western society. In Springer's case, his death elicited this artificial outpouring because he was an agent of cultural subversion who made waging war upon ethnic Europeans and their civilization his life's work. This is his only legacy.